ladies and gentlemen, I hope, of course, for our US facing folks, that you enjoyed your Labor Day weekend. The beach is behind you. The unofficial summer end has come and gone. It's back to school. And if you're not worried about back to school, it's back to football because the NFL is starting Thursday and Friday this week for all of you sports junkies. And no, I did not travel down to Brazil to watch my Eagles play your Packers. That's okay. I'll watch it on TV like everyone else. So before we get too deep into this, we get through, some housekeeping at the beginning of all these sessions because, a lot to say and a lot to do and a little time. So MSP Initiative.com. Here on this website, you will find a copy of a recording from this session, which we are literally doing right now live on September 3rd, by the way. And you'll find it in video, podcast, audio, video format. Like, subscribe, download, share. You know what to do. It's all there. I think I made all that rhyme. Then we have MSP Community Minds. So we have our next one coming up in Denver. This is a live and in-person educational event, September 25th, 26th in Denver. And so why would you come to this? Well, check it out. We have a ton of content, all not content that you're going to swipe your credit card at the end of it. 2 full days with MSP panelists and expert workshop delivery people. And so if you don't walk away with something net new from this, you're asleep. So by the way, it costs you absolutely nothing to register and join us as an MSP. There's no $3.99, $9.99, $12.99 registration fee. Yes, you do have to spend a little bit of time out of your normal day and get there, which obviously will take a little bit of time, a little bit of money, but we're not charging you for the people and the space and the education and the nighttime activities. It's all just part of this for you as our way to give back to the community. So check it out, MSP Community Minds, which you'll find on MSPinitiative.com. Then, and this is probably what everybody actually knows us for, are the MSP Community Block Parties. So we had IT Nation Australia just a week and a half ago. So that's behind us. We have 4 more for the rest of the year. 1, PAX 8 Beyond in Germany. So if you want to check out Berlin, that's right, the one where there used to be a wall way back when. But we were going to Berlin with our friends from PAX 8. We were, in the Denver event with PAX 8 earlier this year. This is our European event and looking to have a good time there as well for the folks that are either from that part of the world or flying across. Then we have DattoCon in Miami. And so this is going to be at Fountain Blue. Our party is literally on site at Live nightclub, which is literally in the lobby. You make a right-hand turn in the Fountain Blue and you're right there. It's built right into the venue. No buses, no Ubers, just walk along and you'll find it. So if you're headed to DattoCon in Miami, join us. Then we have the big one, which we usually do every year at IT Nation Connect in Orlando. So we will be announcing our special guest entertainment. 2 years ago was All American Rejects. Last year was Better Than Ezra, Sugar Ray, and Tonic. This year, it has been booked. Letting you know there is an artist. I will announce that in a little while, so stay tuned. And then we close out our year at DattoCon in Sydney the week after IT Nation in Orlando. So yes, we here at MSP Initiative love collecting airline miles. I still argue I prefer Chick-fil-A points, but to each their own. Then we have the MSP community calendar and deals and offers from vendors from around the sandbox that you may or may not take advantage of. If you do, awesome. We hope they help you. And housekeeping is now officially done. MSPinitiative.com. If you don't know how to spell initiative, just do what I do. Go to Google, type in the word, they'll spell check you, and the rest is copy and paste. All right. Today, we bring a first-time guest on the show, first time ever, so we'll let her give her some background so that everybody can get a little bit of understanding why. But Alane Boyd from Bgbo will be joining us also in Denver on the 25th, 26th, right? And we'll talk about that too. So I'm not going to tell your story, Alane. I'm going to let you tell yours. A little bit of background would be awesome so that people can understand why you are good at what you do.
Perfect. Well, thanks for having me, George. I liked that housekeeping that you did too. So lots of cool things. So my background has been in tech and software for the last 2 decades and sold my company. I had an agency and 2 software platforms, sold it in 2018 and just thought, what do I want to do next? Because I got really bored within about 4 months. And I really love the operations, seeing what tech can do at companies, help alleviating burden on people, working with cybersecurity and just making sure that things are all tidy and cleaned up. And especially for a company that wants to exit, those things are very important. And so now I go in and help companies put in systems, processes, do automation, work with MSPs, either as a managed package service that they can provide, and we work as a partner, or for their own internal company, because a lot of MSPs I see working from spreadsheets.
That's very interesting. So, number one, I want to dive into your background just a little bit in a second, but like,
Okay.
your story is kind of familiar with the MSP pitches to their customer, right? It's like, hey, we're good at what we do. Technology is like a necessary evil. Like, don't fight it, make it work for you. Let's automate it. Although this word has been abused and used for a long time, this word automate, because it's in every marketing I've seen for 20 years, probably longer. And I'm not sure we actually get to the actual outcome of automation. The idea of automation is there, and the window marketing looks really nice, and like I hope that we get there. But like for some reason we spend a lot of money, we don't ever really see actual automation, and then the SaaS companies sit back, collect their money, and then life goes on. So
Yeah.
a lot of money's been made off of that word for whatever it's worth, especially in MSP IT land. Now rewinding for a second, because you said you've built two companies, software companies, and you've exited, which, MSP on one side of the aisle, software company that sells to MSP in the same conversation, just on the other side. So we see a lot of that, right? And there's a lot of software companies that are well known in MSP land that came from an MSP that were like, went out to the world, we tried to find it, didn't exist, we decided to build it our own, and then we made it into a company, right? So
Yep.
this is a pretty common story.
Yes.
Mileage varies. Mileage definitely varies, because for some reason, back right about the time that you sold, it seems like 2017, 18, 19, like the world of investment money showed up in our world. And like there's mixed feelings about it, right? Like, as a owner founder, if I want money, I could get it, right? Like I don't have to go very far to find someone with their checkbook out.
Right.
That comes with a lot of strings, which I want to touch on in a second. On the other side, it's, hey, like as the customer of software company, when this happens, this event happens where money comes in from the outside, it tends not to turn out well for us for some reason. So like, why should I be happy about that? So I'm just throwing those out there, because every time this conversation about, hey, I started a software company, I exited, these are the topics that always come up every single time, whether you're at the bar or you're on this. So just curious about your feelings about those topics.
Well, one of the things that I get very uncomfortable with is taking outside money and raising investment.
Yes.
Because you now have a new boss, and it's very challenging. And so I brought on, in my other company, I brought in an early investor, a seed round. I was bootstrapped before that. I had an agency, saw a need, built the software for it. So I had already been building. And you get to a point where you're like, should I raise money so I can get out there faster? And so I did. I raised an early round, brought on an investor, and it was absolutely terrible. And I eventually, about 18 months or so later, I bought him out.
I'm surprised you had that option.
We did, my business partner and I did some creative financing, and were able to raise some of the money ourselves, just with personal income and with friends and family, bought them out. And then we just did a loan and paid off the rest of the people. So I could see where, people, they get shy, and there are multiple ways to do this. And an investment is just bringing on a VC or somebody. It doesn't have to be everybody's outlet on making it work. And it wasn't mine. I found out luckily early on that I didn't like that, and I like running things the way I want to run it. And I still had an exit.
I mean, number one, you and me, we haven't even talked before this. We're meeting for the first time on this session. For anyone who thinks that we prepare these, we don't. But you sound like me, right? Where I'm just like, hey, listen, I have no lack of phone calls and emails and letters hitting me. Trust me, every day. Okay. But everything comes with a string.
Yes.
Everything. in this lane, if there's no non-string option, right?
Mhm.
And no offense, those strings are worse now than they were back in 2018, where like, let's say you agree to an amount, you're not getting that amount all in one shot. There's like these things that you have to hit before that unlocks. And
Yes.
there's also a lot of protection on the back end for the money giver.
Yeah. And just, there's so many stories too, where one, that doesn't mean you're going to be successful just because you raised money. Most companies still fail. It's worse than restaurants as the percentage of success. So it doesn't guarantee that you're going to make it to the end. And then two, where if they hadn't raised money, they still made the same amount in their exit, because they probably, a lot of times what happens is maybe you got an early offer and you're going, okay, if I got this offer, I'm going to raise more money and then I'm going to get an even bigger offer. And you end up making the same amount because you're so diluted.
Mm. So for all those people who like to watch Shark Tank, myself included, right? Like we always are like,
They're
oh, you
fun.
know, the negotiation's gonna go here. And then Mr. Wonderful comes out with his bean counter and is like, well, I don't know why you're asking for this amount. Yeah, imagine you went through all the extra effort of trying to make somebody else happy with the strings to end up in the same place you would have ended up with not taking anything.
Hmm.
That would be, in like the Monday morning 2020 hindsight quarterback thing, I would be very frustrated in that situation.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too.
So you
So
had
that's
two,
how I got
you had
here.
two software companies or one?
I had two software platforms in the same company.
I
One,
see.
they did two different things, but the second one spawned out of the first one when I saw a huge need in the market and thought, you know what, this is a different niche and I'm going to do a separate platform. And it was so much learning going through doing those things and really finding who your niche customer is and just building for that. And it worked out fantastic. And also what it really means to build an MVP, your minimal viable product. And that's luckily I did it because I was bootstrapped and I had to. But when you do it that way, then you're really building for a core set of pain points and learning how to do it on such a slim budget that you have to do an MVP. And then that's how I was able to do what I was able to do, because I really truly had an MVP. So my first product became my MVP for my second one.
Very interesting. So like the interesting part of all of this is these topics, even though they're very common to any software, like not specific to the IT or managed services, like you could be running software for the restaurant business, who knows? But these topics now apply to the MSP business because they're also now being courted by outside investors and rolling up, using
Yeah,
VCP money.
consolidating them.
And Jen, don't knock Mr. Wonderful. He's investing a lot. Yeah, no, I got Dave Scott on LinkedIn. Of course, Dave Scott. I'm not knocking Mr. Wonderful. I'm just saying
No, we
he's a
love him.
shrewd Dave. He's a shrewd negotiator. He's a shrewd negotiator. Like I would want to be like super prepared going into that one, or he's gonna run you over. Anyway,
Yes, yes.
but the MSPs have to ask these same questions. The difference with the MSP business is, even though they resell a lot of software and subscription-based services, that they don't own any of that, right? They're effectively like almost like a mini distributor to say, if I had to put a categorization to it, their businesses are valued a lot differently, right? And like most
Mhm.
service-based businesses, professional services, accountants, lawyers, architects, IT consultants, you're valued on your net, not your gross, right? So
Right.
like it's a much, you know, more rigorous conversation on how you get to your math before we talk about what your business is worth. But I digress. There's lessons that apply across the board here. Let me ask you one more question before we move on. After you sold your business, did you have any of your customers come back and say that the guy, the people who did buy it did better, worse, the same? Like, what was the feedback after the transaction?
It was really painful, very, very painful. Uh, you know, it's it's hard because you've built a company with your culture and you brought on clients that identify with you and your business. And then when you exit, it is a bit of a challenge. And I would say the clients were a little ruffled, but they really did a good job of maintaining what we built, and they actually were trying to improve their operations to match what we were doing for the rest of the company. So our clients didn't see as much change, but the employees had it much harder. And, they'd been with our employees, just stuck around. They were there for a long time. So that was a bigger, harder thing. And then turnover for the clients. They're like, why are these people that have been with you for 7 years now leaving? So that, I think, was a bigger challenge for them. Luckily, I didn't have to stay on. I stayed on for 18 months to help with the operations side. They wanted what I had implemented for my company because I was such a well-oiled machine. So I stayed on the back end there to help that. And it was difficult.
See, this is the microcosm of every story I've heard, right? Most people have it's like a Jekyll and Hyde, story about this after the paperwork signed and the money shows up in your bank account. But I digress. So if you want to hear more about somebody who's been through this is a reason you should talk to her at Community Minds in September in Denver. Like, you can read all the books you want. You can watch all the videos you want. I love being able to ask questions in real time and like get actual answers. Hey, we feel the textbook says that this is what should, like, that's not real life. Okay. That's just me. Take it for whatever it's worth. I digress. All right. So let's talk about this word automation. Cause like, I think a lot of people want to just take it out back like Mr. Wonderful Dave and shoot it behind the shed. Like, it has been used, abused, stretched, watered down, the whole thing, right? Like, especially in this industry where like kind of supposed to be on the cutting edge of technology and we're supposed to assist companies with what is possible, right? And like open them up to new things. But then like, for some reason, it just seems like there's a lot of manual labor that comes around this automation that we are all promised. So I know AI, right? Like, what used to be called machine learning, now it's AI. I don't care, whatever marketing you want to put around it. I know that's like changing things, and we're in the very early days, wild, wild west of this, and we'll see what that looks like. I think I read somewhere, it's like, well, every 6 months it's got to change. And it's like, maybe we give it a year or two to figure out what that change looks like before I start putting too much time into it, but I digress. So tell me, what does automation actually mean to you?
To me, I like that. So I've been doing automation since I had my previous company. Automation doesn't mean that you have to be using AI. And I think that's where things really got muddy in the last 2 years, that now people automatically associate, oh, if I'm doing automation, I'm doing AI. And that's really scary, especially for MSPs, because what is going into the AI? Are we going to be secure? What data is going to be going into the prompt? All of these things started rising. And to me, automation doesn't even need AI. And it could be something from all of us need clients to stay alive in business, right? So hopefully we're using a CRM and not using just a spreadsheet to manage our leads, but let's assume we're using assuming we're using a CRM. Well, automation can look like when you mark that deal as a one deal in your CRM, that kicks off your new client onboarding checklist. That creates a draft email using a template that you've created. So to welcome that client on board, what do they need to know day one? That can create a Drive or Dropbox folder, whatever asset folder you need. All of that can be done automatically. A client brief can be created and go to the account manager for a seamless handoff. What I was seeing early on in my business is it was taking 2 hours for an admin to take the information from the salesperson and manually create everything that needed to be done for that client. Well, that's 2 hours for every single client, plus whatever other administrative work that could be eliminated. And
It
so
adds up quickly.
it does. And timeframes then now get shortened, where that client doesn't need to sit around and wait until that person has time to onboard them. And sometimes it isn't an admin. Sometimes it's the salesperson. Sometimes it's the account manager. And so that's where a big time frame in automation can really be saved. And that's just one scenario. I like that one because we all have to have sales to stay alive. What needs to get done for you to kick off a new client? And that is where an automation, and then you're looking at consistency because that client is going to be onboarded the same way every other client has been onboarded. You're not worried about, did I forget to do something? Did my team not do something? All of this can be built through automation and then work together with your project management system and the other software platforms you're using.
Wow. So let me pause you right there. I've walked down many a show aisle at many a conference, and they all like the, next to the word automation, that one that's been used and abused. Let me put another word right next to it. Ready? Integration. That word, probably even more than the other word. Okay. And so I've seen entire marketing strategies around the word integration. Again,
Yeah.
what does that integration actually do? Could be a paper tiger, absolutely paper thin. And like, I don't even know why it qualifies for the word integration, but it looks good in your marketing. So like we've all been, and for the people in this industry, IT managed services, the concept of going from Excel spreadsheets and an email box to a PSA, right? Like, our version of the ERP or whatever, maybe it's CRM that's customized to do a bit more, whatever. That was a big jump. And like the people who bought all these products and that were told, oh, so easy, it takes a week or two and you're online, turned into 6 months. Like it was not easy and it was very bulky. And like the blueprints probably took more to create than the software they wrote to actually implement it.
Do it.
That being said, my concern, and maybe this is why you're doing what you're doing now, my concern is a lot of the typical IT managed services company is less than 10 employees. I mean, there are much bigger ones, don't get me wrong, but the majority are sub 10 employees, probably in a lot of cases sub 5 employees. They do not have 40, 80, 120 hours to implement all of these widgets that are supposed to connect each other, to the point where, and Alane, you probably won't be surprised, but I'm going to say it anyway. I can't tell you how many times across my time in the sandbox, and I started about 2000, 2001, it's 2024. Okay. People have bought software subscriptions and bought and bought and bought. And then you go back and be like, hey, I remember I saw you at that show in Orlando in December. We're like, now the next version of that show next year came, and how'd it go?
Yeah.
Actually, we never turned it on. It's still on the box. And it's like, well, why? Well, we didn't have time. Oh, okay. Are you still paying for it? Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah. This is a thing that I've really been getting on my soapbox about is underutilization of your current software. We're always looking outside for the next thing that's going to solve my problems, when really, if you have software in place, it's most likely you're just not using it to the best that it could be, and it's just sitting there. And you're thinking, oh, the problems with the software. Well, it's probably a problem with nobody knows what the process is. Nobody knows how to use it. Training did not exist. Change management wasn't there. So every person's using it differently. We see this all the time when I go into a company, is that every person has their own way. Well, this is how I use it. And this is how I use it. Well, what's your company way of using it? Why don't we do that, first of all? And then, like you mentioned, where, a lot of MSPs are 10 or less employees, you might not need a big, massive automation for yourself. There could be some really small things. I am really a big advocate of what's your current software and how can we tie these together instead of moving to something that does everything. You can, as long as it has an API, you can tie these things together. Now, you do need to know your process. That is a big one. In order to automate, you need to know your process. But in order to train your employees, you need to know your process, or they don't know your process. But these things, when you're an MSP for you've got clients where you're providing services, what kind of automation could be in place there to help them have an easier process? They're likely onboarding employees. What does their new employee onboarding look like? Where could you fit into that as an MSP to help them with that process? What about employee offboarding, where that client needs to know what that automation looks like? And automation doesn't have to be where it goes in and cuts everything off. It could be when you mark this employee as no longer with the company, what's the checklist? What is the list of things that need to happen? Because some people forget to turn off that employee's email and they still have access to it 6 months later.
Oops.
So there, yep. So
Well,
some of it could be for yourself and some of it could be for your clients.
okay. A lot of the time, the process was copied from somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's the Xerox of the Xerox of the Xerox, and it's starting to fade. Okay. That's number one. Number two, the other part of the time is there isn't technically a defined process because the person who created the process is no longer there. The person who put the system in no longer there. It's been, whispered down the lane and morphed over time by different people. And they changed their business process to fit the system, the tool, the software, rather than the other way around.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This happens constantly. It's like, well, our system is designed for you to have this, this, and this. And it's like, we don't have that. Let me give you a perfect example. I remember one time somebody's like, well, in order to implement this system, you need to have a dispatcher in front of your help desk engineers. And it's like, not everybody has a dispatcher in front of their help desk engineers. Like, well, that's how the workflow of the software works. So you should go out and hire a dispatcher. It's like, did you market that I need to hire a new full-time employee in order to implement your software? Like, this was not in the card. So like, how do I
Right.
get this now to work for the way that we work rather than what you thought was the right way? And then like now we're making exceptions to what it was originally designed. This happens all the time.
Yeah. And I think I see that too. And complicated software creates complicated processes. And I think that's why I see a lot of MSPs just go to spreadsheets because they can manage a spreadsheet. It's easy. You can have what feels like a checklist in there. You can share it with your employees, whatever it might be. And so I always like to say there's a step above that that is easy to still implement, but that you're not having to hire a whole nother person to manage the process. Because that's a huge thing. If you got to hire another employee to manage it, of course, the next step is like, well, then I'm just not going to do it because that's a
Right.
huge expense. Employees are our biggest resource. They're the ones that we're paying the most for. Well, a software was supposed to solve my problem, not create a whole new problem and be 10 times as expensive.
Okay. Let me go the other way. So I
Okay.
implement like, and this is, and I'm sure you've touched these, but like, all right, I implement a Salesforce or a HubSpot. And I
Mm-hmm.
spend more time exporting stuff from those systems into Excel spreadsheets because the system's too hard to navigate to get to what
Yes.
I'm after. It's just easier for me to dump the data and manipulate it myself.
Yeah. And I love those two platforms. I think they're fantastic for larger companies. And we do work with a lot of companies that use HubSpot because that is a great CRM. There's a lot of other capabilities to it and it has a great API. So functionally you can do a lot with it outside of HubSpot as well. But most companies don't need a sales force. If you're a 10-person team and you're the lone person selling, maybe you have one other person as a salesperson on your team. Salesforce is probably overdoing it. It is super complicated. Look for something like a pipe drive or something really simple where you're just paying minimally for some functionality of a CRM and you can keep things organized.
Too many times I run into people in MSP land who are like, well, I'll just use the same tool I use for my ticketing system as my sales system. And I'm like, these systems were not designed to do one or the like you're trying, square peg
Yeah.
round hole, basically. Like I get there's workflows, the concept of workflows, and you can do similar things, but they're just you're trying to do too much with something that was designed for service and project management. You're trying to get it to do sales. I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying like you're gonna have to jump through a lot of hoops to get to a point where it feels like it's doing something for you.
Yeah, I agree. And then what happens when you're at a platform that does so many things, then it's too hard to learn everything. And so I do come from the side where let's find the system that works for that need and basics. If you're a small company, you just don't need a lot of bells and whistles. You don't have a whole training team to put together what needs to happen in these. So let's find something simple to use that the team is going to use. And then if we need to use automation to sync things together, we can do that then or
Okay.
not.
No, that's fair. So you work with MSPs today, yes?
Yes.
Okay. What is a typical size MSP that you've worked with since I guess you sold your company in 2018? And like what are the types of systems that you see implemented on a regular?
So I typically work with MSPs around 30 employees. They've done a couple of acquisitions, like you're saying, some small roll-ups to build out their team, maybe get in areas that they weren't in. And what's interesting is when you start getting to a team of 30, that's when these pain points that I've been talking about really start surfacing, because then you spend more time answering questions than you do working on your company. So these things matter at that time. And you don't want to just hire another person, because at that point, it just becomes more chaos on top of more chaos.
That's fair.
Some
That's
some
fair.
common ones that we do, the new client onboarding process is one of our most common ones. And
Mhm,
that's the one that we see being managed from a spreadsheet most often.
mhm.
And so we have a whole workflow for new client onboarding and the workflow for management, like a recurring task every week for that account manager to do a client status update. Where are you at with this client? Is there a roadblock? Is there something that you need to do? Something like that. And then also having a recurring task for that account manager with things to follow up with that client on and ideas so that they don't go untouched for a month. Something to keep us top of mind. So those are really common ones from the client perspective. And then internal management wise are dashboards, capacity planning, things where they can now get a data bird's eye view of their company without having to hop around to 4 different places. So we'll funnel all of that into a dashboard for them to be able to see.
Okay, that makes sense. So new client onboarding, account management, maybe offboarding, right? It's the cousin to the first one. And then making your data work for you, right? Like business, like that's why they use the words another marketing, business intelligence, right? It's like, well, if your data is just siloed and you can't actually take anything meaningful out of it, then what's the point?
Yeah.
It's
One of
just
my
a
favorite.
filing cabinet for you to go back to when something bad happens rather than it actually giving you the ability to make decisions in real time.
Right. And I get so aggravated listening to gut feelings. Well, I had this gut feeling. Like, no, no, because that can lead you down the wrong way. But how about we make decisions based on data? And if you have data in front of you instead of all these gut feelings, because gut feelings does just because you have one doesn't mean it's the right one.
Fair. It's
It could
totally
be
fair.
based on so many things. It could be based on how you're feeling that day. Are you feeling more risky? Are you feeling more confident? Well, then your gut's telling you to go for it.
Okay. That I mean, listen, you're right. I use that too, but I you ask Jen, who's in behind the scenes. I'm a data guy. I'm like, all right, let's go see what we did last year. What are we forecasting for next year? What do we see now? Right? Like things that fluctuate, they shift. So like instead
Mhm.
of guessing, right? Let's just use actual information. And like I get it. Here's the problem. Actual information takes time to gather. Right? I get it. Like
Yeah.
you got, like and I hate to even use this example because I was the person that was like, nah, man, I'm going to use the calculator. I don't need to show you my work. Did I get to the right answer? Then be happy. Like to show your work in math class. I was not a fan of math class. That was me. I was like, nah, I don't, I'm never going to use this in real life. Well, yes, you will. I was like, I'm going to come back afterwards. I'm going to tell you that you were wrong. That was me. But I like, like I can pipe it into like why use the calculator on the SATs? What's the point then? Like to show you my work then. Why do I need to use the machine?
Yeah. I agree with you. I like having the end result too, which is why I like it all clean and in a nice fixed dashboard for me.
Mhm. No, that's fair. I mean, which is funny because in our industry, like two or three major companies have figured out, like built companies around pulling data from multiple systems into dashboards. Some have since been acquired. I digress. But like the data, but what about junk data in, junk data out? If your dashboard's telling you the wrong thing, you're making information, you're taking information that you're saying is valid and you're making business decisions off of inaccuracy.
That was one thing I was going to touch on a second ago. So I'm glad you asked that. That is a problem. You need to make sure if that your data is good data. Number one, even if you have a person manually looking at that, you're still going to get a junk end result. So the first thing is to make sure that your data is good. What data do you want to be looking at and pull that, and then have some spot checks. Make sure that things are calculated correctly. Make sure that things are right. And maybe there's a little bit of a time period in between where you've been doing something manually. Now you're looking at creating a dashboard view, that you're doing some manual checks there to make sure in the first 4 weeks, depending on how often data is pulled, but you really do need to make sure, or you're always, doesn't matter if you put it into a dashboard or not, you're always going to be looking at bad data. So that's the problem. The problem isn't the end result. The problem is where are you getting this information?
Okay. So if I were to zoom back out, what you help people do is save time. But in order to save time and using technology as your way to save them that time, you need to first understand process and workflow.
Yeah, absolutely. You
And
nailed
I
it.
would say, how many times did somebody come to you? I'm sure you're going to say all the time, but I'm going to let you decide that. How
Okay.
many times did
Okay.
somebody come to you and say, we really don't have a process. Can you tell us what our process should be?
Yes, that has happened so often that we only work with a client that knows what their process is.
Hmm.
Because if they don't know what their process is, I can't help them.
Hmm.
It takes for value. Then it takes them so long to put their process together that it's too expensive for them to see the value, because they just wanted the end result, but they
Hmm.
didn't even know what their current state was to get to an end result. And so before we kick off with a client, we're like, we love to work with you, but you come back to us when you know what your process is. That doesn't mean that they need to have it into a workflow diagram, but they need to have a Loom video recorded. They need to have a Word document where they've typed out their process. They need to know, instead of starting at point A with us and saying, well, we don't know. Okay, then you're lost. You've got to start somewhere, and then we're going to work with you.
Well, but that guy's outcome looks really good. Just clone theirs and put our name on.
Yeah, we actually tried that too with doing these like workflows that we see often and have like a templated one that they could purchase. And the problem is that even though there's similarities between workflows, it still is custom to how that client built it. So we've worked with so many clients all over the world that we have a great idea of exactly what needs, the processes, what the workflows look like. But when you get into client workflow, what your services do, that looks very different between companies. And so you can't just pick it off the shelf. If you want to do that, you can just go to make.com and pull one of their automation sequences already built out and plug that in. You don't need an us. But the problem is when you need to customize it for your company, that's when all the nuances come together.
Oh, so you're saying not all technology people are created equal, huh?
Yes, very true.
Okay. Not all businesses deliver services in the same way.
No, no. And there's a great business out there, I'm sure, that is happy to help you put together your workflow if you don't know what it is. And then we can work with you.
Okay. So this is, I mean, this top the getting what your process is, and I get it, right? The 30-person company is gonna should have a different response than the 5-person company.
Mhm.
Actually, I would be intrigued to see the 30-person company that's operating on the 5-person company plan. But hey, I'm sure somebody out there has figured that part out. Like, it's not impossible. But I would say as you hit certain size of companies with the amount of people in there, that has to be adjusted, has to be, more if the clientele is probably changing with you, right? Because you're, and especially and well, hold on. I can't help but come back to something you said earlier. Hey, we work with customers, about 30 employees or more, right? Maybe they've done a few roll-ups and acquisitions. But hold on, those roll-ups and acquisitions were all different companies with different processes. What if they never merged those together?
Okay, that I'm so glad you said that. And it does. This happens. They continue operating their same way when they do these acquisitions because they don't have the time to do any change management. And so these clients are managed this way. These are the services that this client bought from me. This is what we provide. And it is extreme chaos. And then what you see is they acquire 2 or 3 companies and then they can't do it anymore. They are so resource strapped, and there's so much where account managers have 40 different packages that they're managing across the company, that they can't even do another acquisition because they haven't finished cleaning up what they've already done. And it takes so long. I mean, the owner gets burnt out eventually, because how could they keep this up when there's no consistency between all of the different departments, acquisitions, team members, company culture? It's just, I call it spaghetti.
I mean, so you've seen this clearly because it's very vivid the way you're explaining it. I can tell you why that happens. It's very simple. Hey, I went and spent a lot of money, however I got it, whether it came out of the bank account or I borrowed it to buy another business. And I do not want to lose the revenue that I was expecting from that business. If I make a lot of changes, the chance of change means that I could lose clients. So we're just going to keep running things the way that they were running things for, because that's the only way I can maybe guarantee or get to as close to guarantee as possible that revenue stays with me. That's why they do it.
Well, absolutely. And that's, that's the fear part of purchasing a service related business. That's why multiples are so much less on a service, buying a service company versus buying a technology company, a software company, because they could leave easier to go somewhere else. So whenever you purchase a service company, you don't want to lose that. You just bought that company providing that service. You don't want them to leave. And so I can see why that happens, but it is unfortunate from a growth standpoint, because you're at the same time, you're keeping yourself from being able to grow because you're trying to mitigate what is feared in you, that you don't want to lose those.
So if you approach a company, let's say they're 30 employees, they've done 2 acquisitions, and they're in this position where they have not merged their processes, you would tell them to go do that and then come back and see you.
Yeah. Then we would help them outline, because that's the problem that's hard. Okay, well, now I've got this in a Word document. How do I take this process and make it a workflow? How do I make it so that I can delegate, assign, you might have 40 things that need to get done for a client. That doesn't mean all 40 get done by the same person. So that's where or at the same time, right? Some things need to come first before the other things. Some things are linear, some things are tangential. So where we come in is, you've got your process. We're going to make it into a workflow that people can manage, where there's accountability, there's task assignment. Then you can do dashboards off of capacity, then we can build on top of that.
Okay. So if you haven't gotten the message out of this, here's what I got from this so far. One, even if you have an informal process, write it down. Write it down. Xeroxing somebody else's process probably doesn't help you, because if their business isn't identical to your business, which most businesses are not, unless you're a franchise of some company, then, copying somebody else's work may not do you good. It may hurt you more. Okay. And also, what you were doing before, size and time changes what you probably have to be doing now. And it's, we've talked a lot of ways around the whole mergers, acquisitions, buy, sell side, sell side, all this stuff. But this is something that we haven't really talked about. Fast forward into the future, a little bit past that. What happened afterwards? What does it look like now? So you're the guy who bought all this stuff and you're burnt out because you haven't been able to actually successfully merge everything together. And your people are so confused because the menu has 40 items on it instead of 5. There's no efficiency at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you get past the glass ceiling? You've effectively created the glass ceiling for yourself.
Yeah. I mean, there's some uncomfortable times, but I've seen it happen so many times. If you want to put in the time to improve things, it gets so much better. It does take time to put in the stuff that we've been talking about. And like, we're talking about it from acquisition, merger, whatever perspective, but it can just be you're growing your own company and you're hiring and you're feeling these same pain points, because you do change and evolve as a company. You might not offer the same thing you did 5 years ago, right? But they're still on the same package they were 5 years ago. So these things that we're talking about are for anybody that's growing their company, that is tired of doing everything in the day to day. But what I see as a result, and I've seen this, we've done this now with companies all across the world. We've probably done 300 engagements with companies, all different sizes, is that your employee retention goes up. because they're less burnt out. They can get to work, do their job, and at the end of the day, they can leave work and they are happier. So we see where an average employee might stay 6 months, start staying 2 years. Whatever that timeline is for you, they start staying longer because the most important thing to them is work-life balance. They don't want to be worked to death. And then we start seeing the client lifetime value go up because they are being managed consistently, proactively, and they have somebody that is more knowledgeable because they've been with the company longer. They've got more institutional knowledge to help that client. And then we see one thing that companies don't really think so much about is, well, they think about it, but they don't know how to get there, is higher spend from their clients. Their clients start spending more money with them because you have the time to dedicate to them instead of the shitstorm that's been created in your internal processes that they can't see. All the client was seeing is, why is this taking so long? Why is there mistakes here? Why didn't this happen? And you changed that narrative when you started doing these things. And now the client's like, well, you're rocking this. What else can I buy? And you can introduce new services, new packages, better packages.
Hold on. The last 3 minutes. Okay. I've been to a lot of sessions and a lot of conferences, maybe educational events, hopefully not the same one we're running up in September, but like I've been in a lot of breakout sessions. I've been in a lot of peer group meetings. I've been in a lot. And the things you just said as your outcomes to why you should go through this is what I've heard on every single PowerPoint slide deck and every presentation I've been in when it comes to these topics. This is all what they're saying you should have. More sales. Sell your customer more things. Yes, your package should be different than 5 years ago. Yes, you want them to stay with you longer. No, you don't want them to go out and shop for somebody else, on your renewal date. Yes, I have a hard time with my, getting employees and keeping them. No, they're not easy to find, and they have a cost to bring in here every time I bring a new person in. Like, you effectively took the top 5 things everybody complains about, and you just smashed them into like 3 minutes as your outcome. And so, like, sounds to be good to be true, Alane. I'm going to be honest with you because, I've been hearing it for 20 years, and I see the same people come back year after year after year, and like they haven't figured out where the unicorn went.
Yeah. Well, it's because nobody wants to fix the stuff inside, right? We just want to, what could we buy to solve our problem? Just like medication, what can I buy to lose weight? What can I buy to do this? When really all we need is internal. If we have these systems in place, these processes in place, then selling is easier. Then we could put in a sales process. Then we could hire other people to follow the process and get sales so I don't have to do it. And it really is, it sounds too good to be true because not enough companies do it. They're good at what they do. That's why they started their company. Building processes is not anybody's idea of fun, except for probably myself and the people that I hire, because this is what we love doing. But that's not why they started their company. They started their company to be a kick butt MSP, to help people solve a service provider problem, not to build processes in their internal company. That isn't fun for them.
Yeah, I number one, I agree with that. Like, it isn't fun. And number two, but the problems that come because of nobody spent time on this. I've avoided it a little bit, like haven't concentrated enough on it, started it, didn't finish it, copied somebody else's homework. All of these things turned into incomplete.
Mm-hmm.
And incomplete turns into all the problems you just said you've seen actual successful outcomes to. So maybe I'm the problem. Maybe it's me. Maybe I should have completed the process like everybody else did, and I got to see a different story. So I assume some or all of this comes into your workshop at MSP Community Minds.
Yes, this is going to be so much fun. And also I'm a big believer in having things interactive. And so we're going to be doing stuff in real time. You're going to be able to see automation. And I've built an automation sequence so that they can even see a custom workflow built for them within 2 minutes based on the software they use, everything. So we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about how, if you want to use AI, how you can use it to alleviate some of the process burden, not all of it. but showing how to do that.
What should my process be? Go. I can, you know it's happening.
Oh,
You know.
absolutely. Absolutely. So we're going to start off there and we're going to build on this idea and reduce the amount of places that you're going to get data. I think that's a big thing. Data doesn't have to just be numbers. Data can be clients. Data can be who's managing what. And so we're going to be talking through all of those things so that you have everything in one place, how to document it and how to build automation if you want to do that on top of it.
So, you know, I number one, just want to point out real quick, I have not met Alane prior to this session. We did not compare notes. I did not give her questions. I'm simply just talking about what I've seen throughout my journey, right? Now, IT MSP land. I mean, she's not coming in here with any, magic, sprinkles that fixes it, right? Basically, what she's saying is, hey, we do work in order to get you to a better outcome. But she also told you she won't work with you if you didn't do your homework ahead of time. That being said,
know who your clients are.
You've made it very clear, which I would say your clientele is very narrow based on how many people I've talked to. I've not that way, but I digress. I would say if you're interested in what that looks like, let me see what it looks like to go from a piece of paper to it's running. Then you should come to MSP Community Minds and you should pick a brain, because just like the other experts that are going to be doing workshops and the other IT and managed services business owners that are getting up on stage to tell you what they figured out works, it doesn't work. I'm sure Alane's time has a not small dollar amount value to it. Just gonna take a wild. I haven't asked her. I'm just guessing, right? She looks like she knows what her time's worth. So, take the opportunity to come and learn from someone that does this professionally. And so that way you can actually understand, all right, I understand what I'm missing now. What do I need to do to get to the point where I can actually let the system start doing work for me rather than I'm working to make the system work for me? And I think that's the big difference. I mean, let me change the cliche of it, working on your business instead of in your business, right? Except we're using technology to effectively do this. So if you are interested in talking to Alane in real time, because by the way, this has been great. I mean, she knows her stuff, people. I've talked to them. I think I've done 1,000 of these podcast episodes. This person knows what they're talking about. I've talked to some people who I wondered if they really did know what they were talking about, if they're just using cliff notes.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Hey, I'm being honest. I know if you haven't already gotten out of this 45-minute, 50-minute session, I'm straight shooter. I don't like to sugarcoat anything. So number one, check out MSP Community Minds. Go to mspinitiative.com under Community Minds. You will see she's in the schedule. Figure out, circle those. Come. It's free. If you're an MSP, it literally costs you nothing other than time and a little bit of travel. So please take advantage of that. I'm not asking you for anything other than to actually try. Okay, that's number one. Number two, somebody has figured out. Now, granted, she's seen a lot, so I would pick her brain, even though you might not be perfect to work with her yet. But somebody has figured out and gone into businesses and said, here's what you need to do to get to a better outcome. And everything she just said in that sentence 5 minutes ago is what you've been seeing session after session after session. That means somebody has gotten to it, an outcome. It's not, mythical. Somebody's actually achieved it. So, like, I want to talk to the people who have gotten to an outcome. And I like to work backwards personally, right? It's like, okay, if I want to get to where you got, what do I need to do in order, let me work backwards. What are the steps I need to do in order to get here? That's not, hey, it's theoretically possible. It's, hey, you actually did it. How do I do that? Okay. That's just me. Maybe I'm just an, kind of old school guy, but that's how I function. I hope that's how you function too. Alane, where do people find more information about you, your company, what you do, maybe some of the, things that you accomplish on a regular? Tell us more.
Yeah, I'm very active on LinkedIn. So come connect with me, shoot me a message, pick my brain, like George said, and come see me at MSP Initiative in Denver. So outside of LinkedIn, my website is workdayninja.com. And you can see we have free resources on there. If you're trying to figure out where automation fits in, you can fill out a quick 2-minute thing and get a report emailed to you within just minutes. So we've got a bunch of resources for business owners, because the first question is, well, where do I start?
And I bet you that's all workflowed out, Alane.
It is. It absolutely is.
She's drinking her own Kool-Aid.
I
By the
do.
way,
I think
if for the people who are listening to this in the car, please do not watch this while you're driving. Be safe. Alane does not spell her name like Elaine from Seinfeld. Okay, it's Alane. So just if you were like, why can't I find her? Alane, last name Boyd. I'm gonna, if I haven't connected with you already, I'm going to, and I could sit in on your session at this because I'm curious.
I'd love for you to, George.
I want to learn because trust me, I paid a lot of other people to learn. I don't always sit in on this. Sometimes it's sometimes I need to do some things myself every once in a while. So September 25th, 26th. You're a month into school. You got like 3 or 4 NFL games behind you on the schedule. Denver's nice this time of year. It's not cold. It's not too hot. Okay. Like you should be able to get there on maybe a Southwest or United flight into that. I heard security at the Denver airport's much improved. I know we talk about it all the time. So guys, take advantage. I know like we have a lot of smart people in the room. That's why we started this event. Like it's when I said in the beginning, we are literally doing this to give back to the community that we live in. This is exactly this, right? Like I have never seen Alane at an MSP conference before, but she's worked with MSPs and I'm sure other businesses, and she's figured out who has their stuff together and who doesn't. If you're somebody who doesn't have your stuff together, figure out what you need to do to get to the point where you can use the help that she's giving you. And then you're already in a better place. But I can't stress enough. Start writing stuff down. Start putting it somewhere rather than in here. Because when George is on an airplane, the Wi-Fi's out, he ain't getting a hold of me. Just going to tell you. Alane, thank you very much for jumping on here. I'm sure you got a lot of things going on in your day, but I'm looking forward to meeting you in person. And guys, this session was absolutely recorded. We're going to post it online right after this on mspinitiative.com under sessions, the YouTube page, podcatcher. You can go back and I have had people, by the way, come back and say, hey, I watched this episode a month ago and you said this. Fine. You can fact check us. That's why we put them out there. We're not editing anything. Okay. So definitely go back and check that out. Alane, have a great rest of your day. See you in a few short weeks in Denver.
Yes. Thank you, George. This was a blast for me. Thank you.
Have a good one.
Bye.